The lonely cook of Umbria village. In the quiet and picturesque village of Umbria, nestled between rolling hills and lush forest, lived a woman named Nia. Known as the best cook in the village, Nia's meals were beloved by all who tasted them. Her food stall, a modest wooden cart with colorful cloth draped over its edges, was once the heart of the village square. Villagers would line up for her hearty stews, perfectly spiced rice, and sweet pastries that melted in the mouth. But life had not been kind to Nia. She had recently lost her husband, Omar, to a sudden illness. His absence left a gaping hole in her life, and she now had to care for their 6-year-old son, Malik, all on her own. Despite her grief, Nia pressed on, waking up before dawn each day to prepare meals and keep her food stall running. Malik, a bright-eyed boy with a love for helping his mother, would often sit beside her stall, drawing pictures in the dirt and chatting with passers-by. Though she worked tirelessly, Nia began to notice a troubling change. Fewer and fewer customers visited her stall. The villagers, who once praised her cooking, now seemed distracted, drawn instead to a new cook who had set up shop nearby. This new cook, a man named Caleb, boasted flashy decorations and loud promises of the best food in Umbria. His stall quickly became the center of attention, leaving Nia's business struggling. As the days turned to weeks, Nia's income dwindled. Her once full pots of food were left untouched, and Malik's growing needs added to her worries. She stared at the little pouch of coins she had left, wondering how she could make it last. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village square emptied, Nia packed up her stall with heavy hands. Malik, sensing her sadness, hugged her tightly. "Mama, your food is still the best," he said, his voice filled with innocent determination. Nia smiled faintly, but her heart ached. She was running out of options. As she turned to leave, a soft rustling sound made her stop. Out of the shadows stepped a figure cloaked in deep gray, the folds of the fabric swaying gently in the evening breeze. The stranger's face was obscured, but their voice, low and smooth, carried an unsettling calm. "Good evening, Nia," the figure said, startling her. Nia clutched Malik's hand tightly and took a cautious step back. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" The figure chuckled softly. "I know many things about this village. And about you. I've been watching." Nia's heart raced, but the stranger raised a gloved hand as if to reassure her. "Do not fear me, child. I've come to help you." "Help me?" Nia asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," the figure said, their tone measured and deliberate. "I see your struggle. Your hard work. Your love for your son. But hard work alone will not save your stall. The villagers have forgotten you, distracted by false promises and shiny displays." Nia's brows furrowed. "What do you mean? What do you want from me?" The stranger leaned closer, their voice dropping to a near whisper. "I can give you what you need to bring them back. A secret ingredient that will make your food unforgettable. A flavor they will crave, unable to resist." Nia stared at the figure, her heart pounding with both fear and curiosity. "What's the catch?" The stranger tilted their head slightly, as if amused by the question. "Every gift requires a sacrifice," they said cryptically. "But the choice is yours." Nia hesitated, her mind racing. She thought of Malik, of the empty plates and the dwindling coins. Could this stranger's offer save them? Or was it too dangerous to trust someone she didn't know? The figure stepped back, their form blending into the shadows. "Think carefully, Nia," they said, their voice echoing faintly. "When you are ready, call for me. I will hear you." And with that, the stranger vanished, leaving Nia standing in the empty square with Malik by her side, her mind swelling with doubt and desperation. Cliffhanger, Nia lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, torn between the fear of trusting the stranger and the fear of losing everything she held dear. What would she decide? The forbidden solution. The following night, after hours of restless tossing and turning, Nia found herself seated at her kitchen table. The faint flicker of a candle illuminated the small, modest space where she prepared her meals each day. Malik had long since fallen asleep, his soft breaths filling the quiet room, but Nia's mind was far from peaceful. The stranger's cryptic words echoed in her thoughts, "When you are ready, call for me. I will hear you." Hesitant but desperate, Nia whispered into the still air, "If you can truly help me, come back." The room seemed to grow colder, the candle's flame flickering wildly as a shadow moved across the walls. Before she could blink, the cloaked figure reappeared, standing silently in the corner of her kitchen. "You've made your decision, then," the figure said, their voice calm and almost soothing. Nia straightened her back, mustering what courage she could. "I haven't decided anything. But if you truly have a way to help me, I need to know more." The stranger stepped forward, removing their hood to reveal an older woman with piercing eyes and streaks of silver in her dark hair. She looked both wise and unnerving, her gaze cutting straight through Nia. "I am Sword," the woman said. "A keeper of ancient knowledge. I help those who seek me, but my help is not without cost." Nia hesitated, glancing toward the bedroom where Malik slept. "What is this solution you offer?" Sword reached into a satchel slung over her shoulder and pulled out a small vial filled with a shimmering golden powder. It sparkled faintly in the candlelight, as if it held a secret of its own. "This," Sword said, holding up the vial, "is a blend of rare spices and herbs, enchanted with the power to awaken the senses. When added to your food, it will make your dishes irresistible. The villagers will crave what you make, and they will return to your store, begging for more." Nia stared at the vial, her heart pounding. It sounded too good to be true. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sword smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for the question. "For the spice to work, it must be tied to you, to your essence. Each time you use it, you must add a token of yourself. A small, personal offering." Nia's brow furrowed. "What kind of offering?" "Something simple," Sword replied. "A strand of your hair. A piece of your spirit woven into the meal. It is not much to ask, but it is necessary for the magic to bind." Nia recoiled slightly at the thought. The idea of adding something so personal to food felt strange, even unnatural. "And what happens if I don't use it?" Sword's gaze hardened. "Then nothing changes. The villagers will continue to turn away from you, your son will go hungry, and your store will be forgotten. The choice is yours." Nia's heart ached. She thought of Malik, of his innocent smile and the way he still believed she could fix everything. The thought of failing him, of watching him go without, was unbearable. But the idea of using the spice, of mixing a piece of herself into the food, felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she could. I need time to think," Nia said, her voice trembling. Sword nodded, her expression unreadable. "But not too much time. The longer you wait, the further you slip into ruin." She set the vial on the table and disappeared into the shadows as quickly as she had arrived, leaving Nia alone with the golden powder and a heavy heart. For the next 2 days, Nia avoided the vial, leaving it untouched on her kitchen counter. But as the hours passed and her store remained empty, the weight of her situation grew heavier. Malik's cheerful chatter began to fade, replaced by quiet concern as he noticed the growing emptiness in their pantry. On the third morning, as Nia prepared her stall in the dim light of dawn, she reached for the vial. Her hands trembled as she uncorked it, releasing a faint, exotic aroma that made her stomach twist with both curiosity and unease. She hesitated, staring at a single strand of her own hair she had pulled loose. Was this truly what it would take to save her business? Could she live with herself if she crossed this line? With a deep breath, she added the strand of hair to the spice mix and stirred it into her pot of stew. The shimmering powder dissolved instantly, disappearing into the broth as if it had never been there. Nia's hands shook as she ladled the first portion into a bowl, the aroma more intoxicating than anything she had ever smelled. The villagers began to arrive, drawn by the scent wafting through the square. One by one, they approached her stall, curiosity etched on their faces. Nia served them in silence, her heart pounding as she waited for their reactions. The first customer, an elderly woman, took a cautious bite. Her eyes widened, and she let out a small gasp. This is incredible," she exclaimed. Others quickly followed, their faces lighting up as they tasted the food. Murmurs of amazement filled the square, and a small crowd began to gather around Nia's stall. For the first time in weeks, Nia's pots were empty by midday. The villagers praised her food, begging her to return the next day with more. Nia smiled faintly, but deep inside, a knot of unease twisted in her stomach, the rise to fame. The following days were nothing short of transformative for Nia. Her once empty stall was now the center of the village square, bustling with customers who eagerly lined up for her meals. The aroma of her cooking filled the air, and the villagers couldn't stop talking about how her food tasted unlike anything they had ever eaten. "Have you tried Nia's stew? It's divine," one villager exclaimed. "Her rice has a flavor I can't describe, it's like nothing else," another added. Word of Nia's cooking spread beyond Umbria. Soon, people from neighboring villages began traveling to taste her food. Her stall, once overlooked and lonely, now had a constant crowd. The coins in her pouch multiplied quickly, allowing her to buy better ingredients and new cooking tools. A changed life. With her newfound success, Nia was finally able to give Malik the life she had always dreamed of. She bought him new clothes, better shoes, and even a wooden toy he had been eyeing for weeks. Malik's laughter returned, filling their small home with warmth once more. Nia herself felt a sense of relief she hadn't experienced in years. The constant worry about survival had lifted, replaced by the satisfaction of providing for her son. She began to think about expanding her stall into a proper shop, imagining a future filled with security and happiness. But deep inside, a shadow lingered. Each morning, as she prepared her meals, she added the strand of her hair to the golden spice mix. With every offering, a knot of guilt tightened in her chest. She pushed the feeling aside, telling herself it was a small price to pay for Malik's happiness. The seeds of suspicion. As Nia's fame grew, not everyone was pleased. The other cooks in the village, particularly Caleb, who had once been her biggest rival, began to grumble among themselves. "What's her secret?" Caleb muttered to a group of villagers. "How did her food suddenly become so much better than everyone else's?" "It's unnatural," another cook whispered. "She must be using something or someone." The whispers turned to rumors, and soon, people began to speculate about the true source of Nia's success. Some claimed she had made a deal with spirits, others suggested she was using forbidden herbs to enchant her food. Nia heard the rumors but ignored them. As long as people continued to buy her meals, she didn't care what they said. Mysterious side effects. However, things began to take an unsettling turn. Some villagers who ate Nia's food started noticing strange sensations. "I've been craving her stew all day," one man admitted to his wife. "I can't stop thinking about it. I had a strange dream last night after eating her rice," another villager confessed. "It felt so real, like I was flying." At first, the villagers laughed off these experiences as coincidences, but as more people reported similar stories, unease began to spread. "She's put something in the food," one woman whispered to a neighbor. "Something unnatural. It's why we can't resist it." The murmurs of suspicion grew louder, casting a shadow over Nia's booming business. Malik's discovery. One afternoon, as Malik played near the square, he overheard a group of villagers talking about his mother. "She's using magic," I'm sure of it, one man said. No food can taste that good without some kind of trick. She's bewitched us all, another added. Mark my words, there's something dark behind her success. Malik's heart sank. He ran home, his mind racing with questions. When he arrived, he found Nia in the kitchen, preparing the next day's meals. Mama, he said, his voice trembling, is it true? Are you using magic in your food? Nia froze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. She turned to face Malik, her face pale. Why would you ask me that, Malik? I heard the villagers, he said, tears welling up in his eyes. They are saying you've done something bad. Nia's heart broke at the sight of her son's distress. She knelt down and held his hands, her voice soft but heavy with guilt. Malik, I did what I had to do to take care of us. But I would never hurt anyone. You have to trust me. Malik pulled his hands away, his voice rising. But you're hiding something, aren't you? Tell me the truth, Mama. What did you do? Cliffhanger. Nia looked into Malik's tearful eyes, her heart pounding as she grappled with whether to confess everything. Could she tell her son the truth and risk losing his love, or would she keep her dark secret hidden? Malik learns the truth. Mother and son's conversation. Nia sat Malik down at the kitchen table, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was about to say. She had kept the secret buried for so long, but now her son's tearful eyes and pleading voice left her no choice. Malik, she began, her voice trembling, I need you to understand something. Everything I've done, it's all been for you. What do you mean, Mama? Malik asked, his brows furrowed in confusion. Nia hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. She reached for the small vial of golden spice resting on the counter and held it up. This, she said, is what makes the food so special. It's why people keep coming back. Malik stared at the vial, his young mind trying to piece it together. It's just spice. No, Malik, Nia said, shaking her head. It's more than that. It's magic. Malik's eyes widened, and he leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Magic. Mama, what are you talking about? Nia took a deep breath and explained everything, the cloak stranger, the enchanted spice, and the personal token she had to add each time she cooked. She told him about her desperation to save their stall and how she had convinced herself it was the only way to provide for him. I never wanted to do anything wrong, she said, her voice cracking. But I couldn't bear to see you go without, Malik. I couldn't watch us lose everything. Malik's disapproval. Malik sat in stunned silence, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. Finally, he stood up, his voice trembling with anger and hurt. You lied to everyone, he said. You lied to me. How could you, Mama? How could you do something so wrong? Nia reached for him, but he stepped back, tears streaming down his face. You didn't have to do this. We would have been okay. We always found a way before. Malik, please, Nia pleaded, her voice breaking. I did this for you, for us. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. You had a choice, Mama, Malik said, his voice filled with disappointment. And you chose to do something bad. Nia's heart shattered as she watched her son run to his room and shut the door behind him. She sat alone at the table, clutching the vial in her hands, unsure of how to make things right. The stranger returns. That night, as Nia sat by the window, lost in thought, the air in the room grew cold. The flame of the single candle flickered, and a familiar shadow appeared in the corner. You called for me, Sot said, her voice calm but commanding. I didn't call you, Nia snapped, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. Sot smirked. Perhaps not aloud, but your heart did. I can feel your fear, your doubt. The villagers are whispering, and even your son questions you now, doesn't he? Nia glared at the herbalist, her hands clenched into fists. This is your fault. You said this would help me, but now it's tearing everything apart. So tilted her head, her piercing eyes narrowing. You knew there would be a price. And now, the power you wield is growing. The side effects you've seen, the villagers' strange cravings, their dreams, they are proof of the spice's strength. What do you mean? Nia asked wearily. The more you use it, the more it binds to them. Their minds, their hearts, their very souls will hunger for your food, Sod explained. But this power demands more from you, Nia. The token you give, your hair, is no longer enough. A new demand. Nia's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean it's not enough? Sod stepped closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. The spice requires something greater now. Something more personal, more meaningful. It is time for you to give a piece of your blood. Nia recoiled, her eyes wide with horror. Blood? You want me to bleed for this? Just a drop, Sod said, holding up a small, dark glass vial. Mix it with the spice, and your success will continue to grow. Your name will be known far beyond this village. You will have everything you've ever dreamed of. Nia shook her head, backing away. No. I won't do that. I've already given enough. Soda's expression hardened, her calm demeanor replaced by something colder. Refuse, and the consequences will be dire. The spice does not forgive broken promises, Nia. You will lose everything you've gained, and more. Nia's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the counter for support. I need time to think. Sod smirked, her figure beginning to fade into the shadows. You don't have much time. Choose wisely, Nia. The price of failure is far greater than the cost of obedience. Cliffhanger. As the herbalist disappeared, Nia sank to the floor, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. The vial of golden spice sat on the counter, glowing faintly in the dim light, a cruel reminder of the decision she now faced. Upstairs, Malik lay awake in his bed, tears streaming down his face as he thought about his mother's confession. He had always admired her strength, but now, he wasn't sure if he could trust her. Nia stared into the darkness, her heart heavy with guilt and dread. Would she make the sacrifice to maintain her success, or would she risk losing everything she had fought so hard to gain? The villagers' revolt. Rumors turned to anger. The whispers about Nia's food had turned darker in the weeks that followed. What had started as envy and suspicion among rival cooks had grown into outright accusations. She's not using normal spices, one woman hissed at the marketplace. I saw her sprinkling something strange into the pot. It's unnatural. She's bewitched the whole village, Caleb declared loudly to a gathering of neighbors. Her food doesn't just taste good, it controls people. Why else would they all crave it so much? The villagers, many of whom had experienced the odd cravings and vivid dreams after eating Nia's food, began to wonder if the rumors were true. While they still lined up at her store, their eyes carried a mixture of awe and unease. A festival turned sour. The annual Harvest Festival was a grand event in Umbria, a celebration of abundance and community. As the centerpiece of the feast, Nia was invited to serve her famous dishes, a testament to her growing status in the village. She worked tirelessly to prepare her best meals, mixing the golden spice with a drop of her blood for the first time, just as Sod had instructed. The aroma of her cooking wafted through the square, drawing crowds of hungry villagers. But as the festival reached its peak, disaster struck. Elder Baisa, one of the most respected leaders in the village, suddenly collapsed after eating a bowl of Nia's stew. He clutched his chest, gasping for air, as the crowd around him erupted into panic. Help him, someone shouted, but it was too late. The elder's face turned pale, and his body fell limp. The square fell silent, the joy of the celebration replaced by fear and confusion. All eyes turned to Nia. "What did you put in the food?" Caleb yelled, stepping forward. "You've poisoned him." "I didn't." Nia cried, shaking her head. "I swear I didn't poison anyone." But her protests fell on deaf ears. The villagers, already suspicious of her, were now gripped by anger and fear. The village confrontation. The next morning, an angry mob gathered outside Nia's store. The villagers, armed with sticks and stones, shouted accusations and demands for her to confess. "You're a witch," one man yelled. "You've cursed this village with your food," another added. Nia stood frozen behind her store, Malik clutching her hand tightly. "Please, listen to me," she pleaded. "I've done nothing wrong. I only wanted to cook good food for you all." "Then why is Elder Barisa dead?" Caleb spat. "Your food is dangerous, and we won't stand for it anymore." The crowd surged forward, their anger growing with every word. Some began to throw stones at her store, smashing pots and scattering the remnants of her cooking. Malik's plea. "Stop it!" Malik shouted, stepping in front of his mother. His small frame shook with fear, but his voice was strong. "She's not a witch. She's my mama, and she works hard to feed everyone. She didn't hurt anyone." The crowd hesitated for a moment, taken aback by the boy's bravery. But Caleb stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "Then let her prove it," he said, narrowing his eyes at Nia. "If she's innocent, she'll tell us exactly what she's been putting in the food." All eyes turned to Nia, the villagers' demand for the truth ringing in her ears. Malik looked up at her, his eyes filled with hope and desperation. "Mama, tell them," he whispered. "Tell them the truth." Cliffhanger, Nia's decision. Nia's heart pounded as she looked out at the crowd, then down at her son. She knew the truth could destroy everything she had worked for, but the weight of her secret was crushing her. If she revealed the truth, the villagers might never forgive her, or worse, they might turn their anger on Malik. But if she lied, she risked the wrath of the villagers growing even stronger. With her son's pleading eyes on her and the mob demanding answers, Nia took a deep breath, knowing that her next words could change everything. The curse unveiled. Nia's confession. The weight of the villagers' angry stares bore down on Nia. She felt trapped, her son's pleading eyes urging her to speak while the crowd's accusations burned into her heart. She took a trembling step forward, her voice breaking as she began to speak. "It's true," she said, her words barely audible at first. Then louder, "It's true. I did something unnatural." The villagers gasped, their voices rising in shock and outrage. "I was desperate," Nia continued, tears streaming down her face. "I met a woman, a herbalist. She gave me a spice that could make my food irresistible, and I used it to save my store, to save my son and myself. But it came with a price." "What price?" Caleb demanded, stepping forward. Nia swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "Each time I cooked, I had to add a piece of myself. My hair, my blood. The spice wasn't just a seasoning, it was magic." The crowd erupted into chaos. "She admits it. She's a witch. She's been feeding us cursed food all along." Malik clung to her side, his small body trembling as the villagers hurled accusations and insults at his mother. The villagers' fury. "Enough!" Caleb shouted, silencing the crowd. He pointed a finger at Nia, his face red with rage. "You've betrayed this village, Nia. You've poisoned us with your greed and witchcraft. You're not welcome here anymore." The villagers roared in agreement, their anger spilling over. They swarmed Nia's store, smashing the pots and overturning the tables. Her carefully prepared food spilled onto the ground, trampled underfoot. Leave, someone shouted. Take your curse with you. Malik cried out as the mob pushed them toward the edge of the square. Nia held her son tightly, her heart breaking as she watched everything she had built reduced to rubble. The herbalist's final visit. That night, Nia and Malik sat in the ruins of their small home, the weight of their banishment pressing heavily on them. Nia wept silently, clutching Malik to her chest as she whispered apologies he was too tired to understand. As the moon rose high in the sky, the air grew cold, and a familiar presence filled the room. The shadows danced, and Sword stepped out of the darkness, her cloak flowing like smoke behind her. You've lost everything, the herbalist said, her voice calm but sharp. Nia glared at her through tear-streaked eyes. This is your fault. You promised to help me, but you've ruined my life. I gave you what you asked for, Sword replied coolly. You wanted success, and I delivered. But you failed to understand that power always demands a price. And now, I've come to offer you one final chance to reclaim what you've lost. Nia stiffened, her arms tightening around Malik. What do you want now? Sword's piercing gaze fell on Malik, who had fallen asleep against Nia's shoulder. Your son, she said simply. Give him to me, and I will restore everything. Your store, your wealth, your fame, it will all return, greater than ever before. Nia's breath caught in her throat. No, she whispered. I won't do that. He's my child. Think carefully, Sword said, her tone unwavering. Without him, you can rebuild your life. With my power, you will be adored by all. Your suffering will end. Nia shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. You're a monster. I'd rather have nothing than give up my son. The herbalist's eyes darkened, and her smile turned cold. Then you will have nothing. But be warned, Nia, defying me comes at a cost greater than you can imagine. Nia's choice. The herbalist vanished into the shadows, leaving Nia trembling and alone with Malik in her arms. She sat in silence, staring at the moonlit room around her, the weight of her decision pressing down like a crushing wave. She could feel the darkness creeping closer, the promise of consequences that Sword had left behind. But Nia held Malik tighter, whispering softly, I will protect you, no matter what. Cliffhanger. As the first rays of dawn broke through the window, an eerie wind swept through the house, carrying with it the faint scent of the golden spice. The walls seemed to groan, and the shadows shifted unnaturally. Nia felt a chill run down her spine as Malik stirred in her arms, his small voice breaking the silence. Mama, he whispered, his eyes still half closed. What's that sound? Nia froze, her heart pounding as the room seemed to darken around them. The consequences of her choice were beginning to unfold, and she had no idea what was coming next. Redemption or ruin. Facing the consequences. Days turned into weeks, and Nia lived in the shadow of her decision. Her once thriving store was gone, her reputation in ruins. Malik often sat quietly by her side, sensing her sorrow but never asking questions. The ominous winds that followed the herbalist's final visit eventually faded, leaving behind a profound stillness that filled their small, broken home. One morning, as the sun rose over Umbria, Nia made a choice. She couldn't live in hiding any longer. The weight of her guilt and the harm she had caused to her community needed to be faced. I need to go back to the village, she told Malik as they sat at their small wooden table. Why? Malik asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. To make things right, Nia said softly, brushing a strand of hair from his face. No matter what happens, I need them to know I'm sorry. The villagers' response. Nia walked into the village square with her head held low, Malik by her side. The villagers, busy with their morning routines, stopped in their tracks as they noticed her. Whispers spread like wildfire. Why is she back? Does she think we've forgiven her? She has no place here. Nia took a deep breath and stepped forward, raising her voice so everyone could hear. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she began, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. But I'm here to ask for it anyway. The crowd grew silent as Nia explained everything, her desperation, her deal with the herbalist, and the sacrifices she made in a misguided attempt to save her stall and her son. I was wrong, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. I let my fear and pride drive me to do something terrible. And I hurt all of you in the process. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, an elderly woman stepped forward. It was Elder Barosa's wife, her eyes filled with grief. You cannot undo what has been done, the woman said, her voice trembling. But I can see the pain in your heart, Nia. You've paid a heavy price for your choices. Others began to murmur, some nodding in agreement. While many were still wary, they couldn't ignore the genuine remorse in Nia's voice. A new beginning. Though the villagers didn't fully trust her, they allowed her to stay. But Nia made a solemn vow, she would never cook for profit again. Instead, she channeled her passion for food into teaching. She began inviting young women from the village to her small home, teaching them the art of cooking with love and honesty. Her lessons were about more than food, they were about resilience, community, and the value of staying true to oneself. I made mistakes, she told her students one day, kneading dough with her hands. But you don't have to make the same ones. Cooking is about bringing people together, not tearing them apart. The lesson learned. Malik grew up watching his mother transform from a woman consumed by guilt to someone who inspired others. Her story became a cautionary tale, one he carried with him as he grew older. When he was old enough, Malik began traveling to nearby villages, sharing the story of his mother's rise and fall. He spoke of her mistakes, her courage to face the consequences, and her unwavering love for him. Her story isn't about failure, Malik would tell the crowds. It's about redemption. She taught me that even when we make the darkest of choices, there's always a way to step back into the light. Ending on hope. Years later, Nia sat outside her small home, watching the sunset with Malik by her side. The village was quiet, the distant sound of laughter and conversation drifting through the air. Do you think they'll ever forget? Malik asked, glancing at his mother. No, Nia replied with a gentle smile. But that's okay. It's not about forgetting, it's about learning. And I hope they remember that even in the worst of times, we can always choose to make things right. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Nia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Her journey had been painful, but it had also led her to a place of understanding and growth. In time, Nia's legacy in Umbria was no longer one of betrayal but of redemption. The villagers told her story for generations, not as a warning of what to avoid, but as a reminder that even the darkest mistakes could pave the way for a brighter future. The end.